The cell membrane. The cell membrane is really an amazing structure. And it's this structure made up of all these parts here. It's called a fluid mosaic model because it's made up of many parts, which is what mosaic means, and those parts are moving around and they're not stationary, so fluid. Here's a very basic one here. And so this part looks like a small jellyfish, and this is the lipid. And there's two of these layers of lipids here, so it's called a lipid bilayer. And then this bigger part here is a protein. At its most basic core, this is what the cell membrane is made up of. It is the interaction of these parts that allows it to work, and in particular, work for the transport of molecules inside and outside of the cell. One way that molecules move through is diffusion, and they simply slip through. So oxygen gets through this way, and water gets through this way. They will simply move from inside to outside the cell, from where there are more of them to where there are less of them, or the opposite. So if outside the cell we had 10 oxygen, and inside we had 5 oxygen, they will move back and forth until they get an equal amount on each side. Once they are equal, they will stop having a net change in diffusion. They might still move across, but if one moves across one way, then another will bounce back the other way to equalize it. When water moves this way, it's called osmosis. And when anything else moves this way, it's called diffusion. It doesn't require energy because they simply move from the concentration gradient. Think of it kind of like moving down a hill or with gravity. This happens anywhere in the cell membrane because the cell membrane is not like a plastic bag. It is not sealed tight. There are little spaces between all of the lipids that make up the lipid bilayer. And those molecules then can slip through and flow on through to the other side. Another type of movement is called facilitated diffusion, and this requires the use of a protein, and facilitated diffusion is sort of like opening a window in your house. If the cell needs to move something, say like glucose, from one side to the other, it will open up a protein channel, so like a doorway or a window, that only that glucose can fit through. And the glucose will move through, but it will move through without any energy. Therefore, both of these are called passive transport. If there's 10 glucose on this side and 0 on this side, they'll move until there's 5 and 5 on each side. It doesn't take any energy, but it requires a special protein as a channel. And then the last one is active transport, for movement of large molecules or smaller ones against how they would flow naturally from one side to the other. Active transport also uses a protein pump as well. But I'm going to show one a little differently here. This isn't what it really looks like, but it's a good model. We think of our protein right here as sort of like a revolving door. If the cell needed to move, say, potassium, it would make a protein that had a receptor that only potassium could fit into. We'll represent that as this triangle piece here. And once that fits into there, then that changes the shape of this protein. And by changing the shape of the protein, you change the electric charge on it. And that causes it to flip around to the other side. Once it's on the other side, then that molecule will get released into the inside of the cell or the outside of the cell. Once it's released, then it leaves an opening, and then this will flip back to transport something again. So it's like a revolving door, and that requires energy to move and energy to make. Therefore, it's called active transport because the cell has to readily use energy, and specifically ATP, to cause this to change shape and to flip from one side to the other side. Now, the cell can also absorb molecules, really large molecules. Here's our cell. The membrane of the cell and the molecule comes in contact with it, a really big piece of something. The cell can make a depression here and wrap itself around that molecule and move that molecule to the inside. Then part of the cell membrane will become a vesicle that will surround that molecule. It's using its own cell membrane to make another little membrane around it, almost like a little floating stomach inside the cell. And then it can start digesting it and breaking it down. It can do the same in reverse. It can take a big particle it doesn't want anymore and move it to the outside of the cell and merge that vesicle with the outer membrane and then release that molecule to the outside. So it can move really big things inside and out as well.